Welcome back to another episode of Caps Off by the Game Day. It's fantasy day. Fantasy season is here, not just football. Before we jump into talking fantasy, Felipe, you want to let people know that are listening what to expect with fantasy and like kind of what this schedule is for the new season?
Well, we're going to have episodes coming out, Tuesday and Thursdays?
Tuesday and Thursday, fantasy. And
Tuesdays will be kind of recapping the past week and any moves you should make there, right? As far as...
like waiver wires or anything that could happen like for the next day.
That type of stuff. And then Thursdays, looking ahead, start, sit, that type of shit. You know, the usual. The usual.
But like the reason I think we wanted to do this was not only do you and I obsess over fantasy, but a lot of people that follow us ask for fantasy advice.
True.
Now, I don't know why they're asking for advice from us.
Because they like us. Yeah, it's probably because you're cute.
You're pretty cute. You're the one that gets recognized.
That's true.
Yeah. But, yeah, so we're going to just talk through fantasy week over week, twice a week. Fantasy advice. Our goal is to obviously help you try and win your league.
Facts.
I think our other episodes, we always fuck around, but this one we're going to be a little bit more, not necessarily serious, but try and talk fantasy. Like, it's a different type of conversation.
Could actually be helpful.
Yeah, try and be helpful.
I'm not going to say that Rashad Bateman's more of a number one receiver than Cooper Kupp.
Or Zay Flowers is as good as Cooper Kupp and shit.
Yeah, Zay Flowers is elite, bro.
Cooper Kupp.
I will say draft him number one overall if you haven't drafted in your fantasy league yet.
Yeah.
Zay Flowers number one.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I saw someone in it wasn't in my league, but it was another league. Someone took Alexander Madison in the second round.
Did they actually?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's insane. But before it's wild, right? Before we like begin talking about, because what I want to talk about today is like looking at top 50 players and some guys you think, you know, like some of your hot takes, like where are you planting your flag? So for example, I'm planting a flag on Travis Kelce, you know, this being the year finally Travis Kelce regresses a little bit.
Ooh.
I don't believe, like I still think he's worth that top, you know, you could pick him in the first, but he's going in like that top 5 or 6 range, and like I think it's too high to go for a tight end. So we're gonna kind of talk through some things like that. Guys like Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, like what you expect from them. So where you're planting your flag in fantasy for hot takes. Nice. But before we go into that, you auto drafted a fantasy team this year.
Yeah, I fucked up.
So you were in Brazil.
You made it sound like I opted to do that.
No, you did opt. You chose to do that.
Yeah, bro. I honestly had no fucking idea. Right. I was out actually at dinner with my dad and my girlfriend. In a little town in Brazil. They call it the Switzerland of Brazil. It's very like Swiss-like.
Oh.
And yeah, my boy Dom, he's probably going to listen to this. Shout out Dom.
Shout out the wife beater.
He's been referenced so often on this podcast. Like everyone knows who Dom is now. But he texted me and he's like, yo, you auto-drafted? And I'm like, huh? And I'm like, oh, shit. And he's like, yeah, bro, our draft is like right now. And it's... For context, it's a league we've been doing for like 6-7 years, like every single year.
Did you just forget that you had a draft?
Yeah, I forgot. Honestly wasn't thinking too much about it. I put way more thought into my dynasty league at this point.
Yeah. Well, you are a GM. And you did win last year.
And I won the championship. But in this league last year, I made the championship and lost. The year before that, I made the championship and won. So like I run this league.
Right, yeah.
And because I'm a good drafter. And I totally forgot. So by the time he texted me, it was like we were like 5 picks in. Or 4 picks in, I think. And then after that, the 5th pick was DeAndre Hopkins. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want this team. And so that's what happened. But we can look at it now.
Well, yeah, we're going to look at it. I think it's we were trying to think of like things we could do week over week for this type of episode. And I think every single week we should try and turn this team into a contender now that you've auto-drafted a team, basically. And I think a lot of people, I don't want to say like, not many people are great at fantasy and turning teams into like a contender. Sure. So because you auto-drafted a team, Felipe and I, you and me and you, we are going to turn this auto-drafted team into a contender by the end of the season. And we're going to follow it week over week. We're going to update people listening. So just to show like what we can do and how stupid we are. So, yeah, go over the team. Let me know. What are we working with?
Yeah, so this is what is disappointing. I had the 3rd overall pick. And
I can't believe you went Eckler.
Number 1 went Jettas. 2 was Jamar Chase.
And we could have got CMC.
CMC was there, Kupp, Tyreek Hill, a bunch of these guys, and we went Eckler. So
that's tough.
At the top of the second round, or I guess at the bottom of the second round, we took Jalen Waddle.
I like that.
Then we took T. Higgins.
Hate that.
Yeah.
Because you could have got Ridley probably or something.
Ridley went like 7 picks later.
Yeah.
A lot of guys went after that.
It's going to be tough.
And then we went, let's see.
Just give us like the
Joe
starters.
Burrow.
Okay. Not bad.
Then we went DeAndre Hopkins.
Very tough.
With some good guys on the board.
This might be a lot harder than I thought.
And then we went Cam Akers.
Yeah, this is going to be.
And then we went Jerry Jeudy.
Okay. hamstring.
I think he has a high upside
if
this year,
hamstring
actually.
recovers, yeah.
Then we went David Njoku.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
So let's start with just go to the waivers real quick, and let's just see if we can. What's the bench look like?
That's a good point. You know what? I'm looking at the email that they send you after you draft.
Yeah, the update. Yep.
Yeah.
So to start off this auto drafted team. Oh, phone down. What?
Phone down, man down.
Phone down, man down. All right.
Hand down, man down.
Yep.
So hold up. So I'm trying to log in right now.
On Sleeper?
No, on ESPN. This is an ESPN league.
So
So I was looking at what I was looking at right now was the email they send you of the draft recap.
Yeah.
And so
It's gonna be tough. I think out of the gate,
Yeah,
the way I'm looking at,
It's
we're
gonna be
gonna
fucking
have to trade Eckler and T Higgins. Like we're just gonna need to get right now. Put him on the block. I think Njoku can be good, but like I think where we end up turning this season around is like right on the waiver wires right now before week 1. So
before week 1,
I'm losing my voice also a little bit, from that first episode. Lost my voice a little bit.
hey man, well, it's gonna be a weekly occurrence.
Taking a long
the voice
time.
better be back.
Taking a long time for you to log in right now.
I had to re-download the app.
Yeah. Yeah, you hate to see it. Well, out of the gate, I think guys that I would want to target that could be available.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start with your tight end, right? We have David Njoku. I think looking at those rookie tight ends now, it's been like 7-8 years since or not even, I think since 2000, I think it is. There's only been like a handful of times that a rookie tight end has finished as a tight end 1. Now, granted, this was the best rookie class for tight ends in a decade. And I think when you look at the way some of these tight ends went to some of these teams, like there's a high probability that a guy like a Dalton Kincaid who's playing like a wide receiver, who's playing in the slot, a guy like Luke Musgrave who dominated snaps for the Packers, and that 2 spot for targets is wide open for the Packers. Even guys like Sam Laporta or like a Michael Mayer. So what I would want to do is I would want to target Luke Musgrave, like if he's available. Bless you. I don't think Dalton Kincaid's going to be available, but I think guys we should target if they're available on the waiver wire right now are guys like Marvin Mims, because Jerry Jeudy's going to be out for the Broncos, and he's going to get playing time. Jaden Reed, slot guy for the Packers from Michigan State. I think Jaden Reed's the type of guy with, like I said, that wide receiver 2 spot or that target number 2 spot for targets in Green Bay is wide open. So he's another guy we could target. Luke Musgrave, I obviously mentioned. Any particular guys that you're seeing there on that waiver?
So before I even get into the waivers, now I'm seeing my full team.
Oh,
so we drafted Joe Burrow,
Okay.
Dak Prescott, and Daniel Jones.
Let's go! Let's go!
And we drafted Jeff Wilson Jr.
Let's go! He's on IR. That's elite.
Yeah, bro.
So good.
It's so bad.
It's so good.
God damn.
All right, so here's what's
All
going
right,
to happen.
I can look at the waiver now.
Yeah,
You want to look at the waiver?
We're going to trade Joe Burrow. I'll tell you that right now. We're going to start Dak Prescott. And the reason I'm saying some of these guys is like, where can we get value and kind of like space out the team a lot more and get some? I think Joe Burrow's a guy that's probably getting overvalued a little bit. I think he's going to have a good year, but I think with Dak Prescott, he's probably someone that no one would want to trade for. I think Dak's going to have a good year, so therefore we get a bigger return for Joe Burrow.
Okay.
So who's available? Let's go to tight ends first. Is Luke Musgrave available?
Yes.
Okay, I want us to add Luke
There's
Musgrave.
a lot of guys available.
Okay,
actually.
great. Because Luke Musgrave is a guy that, like I keep saying with the Packers, that tight end or that target spot for number 2 is wide open. He played a fuck ton of snaps. His usage rate in the preseason was incredibly high. And yeah, I think he's a guy that like can easily be a low-end tight end 1. So we add Luke Musgrave because David Njoku's not a set and forget it. Well, who's on the bench? I haven't seen the team. Well, first of all,
Dalton Schultz is on the team.
Let's draw. Well, let's
I
drop.
have Njoku and Dalton Schultz.
Well, we might have 3 tight ends at the end of this because we need to find 1 tight end. Let's drop Daniel Jones for starters.
Like Daniel Jones.
And then we'll move on from this. But
all right, Daniel Jones is gone.
Okay, who else is?
Musgrave is on.
Fire. Players, Marvin Mims, Jaden Reed, Ty Chandler.
Marvin Mims, Jaden Reed. It looks like both those guys.
Can I just see?
Yeah, bro.
Let me take a look.
Dude.
Let me take a look. Marvin Mims is there.
Oh, he is there.
Van Jefferson's also there, who Cooper Kupp's going to be out for a little bit. Let's go Marvin Mims because I think we have Jerry Jeudy on the team, so he's not going to be there. Well, first of all right, here we go. We're going to move. Is your team name IEAS?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Just wanted to make sure that was the right team.
That's the team.
Yep. Okay. We're going to move Jeff Wilson to the IR. Okay. So we're going to target right now guys that could, in these first 2 weeks, 3 weeks, have some value.
Okay.
guys that could perform, and then we could trade them, pair them with a Joe Burrow, pair them with an Austin Eckler, try and get some return back and reset the team in a way. So one of those, Zeke's available. Interesting.
Yeah, he is available.
Interesting. I think we pick up Marvin Mims, wide receiver for the Broncos. Jerry Jeudy's going to be hurt. He's the wide receiver 2 there, so we just added him, right?
Nice.
A guy that can get some usage. We say Cortland Sutton can't get any separation.
He can't. No separation. But he's from Dallas. So
but he's from Dallas. Van Jefferson isn't bad. I think we should pick up Evan Hull. Evan Hull is a guy. He's the running back for the Colts. Jonathan Taylor's obviously out.
Is he number 1? No?
No, Deion Jackson is. They also have Zach Moss. But we know Zach Moss wasn't the guy in Buffalo. Deion Jackson had a couple good games last year and definitely filled in like a promising way. But Evan Hull led FBS last year in receiving yards.
Receiving back.
So he's a receiving back and a young guy that can kind of have some value. So, again, because we're adding them on the waiver wire, we're taking flyers. So I think Evan Hull is a guy we should add as well. We are going to drop. Oh, we have Cortland Sutton as well. Cool. We're going to drop Dalton Schultz.
Fuck Dalton Schultz, man. Product of Dak Prescott anyway.
Wait, okay, this is kind of a disaster, this team. But so whatever. Right now, we have guys on the bench that could perform in week 1. We're going to check back in week over week. We're going to try and turn Felipe's auto-drafted team into a contender. Not win, but a contender. We got to make the playoffs. That's the goal with this auto-drafted team.
All right.
So we'll check back in week over week and see what we can do.
Oh, man. I'm scared of this team, bro.
You're going to do great. We're going to do great. But now I kind of want to spend this episode, the rest of these 10 minutes, talking about guys that, you're planting the flag on, as I mentioned, your hot takes for fantasy, maybe guys that you're colder on, hotter on, but kind of what are your expectations? Now, I'm not saying Justin Jefferson finishes as the wide receiver 1, but obviously Cooper Kupp got injured, right? So where's Cooper Kupp, being drafted? Where does he need to be drafted? What would you do with Cooper Kupp given his hamstring injury? Let's start with Cooper Kupp.
So what's his timetable?
So it says day to day. He's seeing a specialist in Minnesota.
That's never good.
Which is never good. Hamstring also has the highest percentage of re-injury. The thing with Cooper Kupp, though, is we're talking about a guy that could have finished as the overall wide receiver 1, probably going in the second round right now.
Yeah, because of that.
Yeah. So I've seen drafts.
The value there is insane. The value is incredible.
It's insane. I've seen guys have Jettis and Cooper Kupp. I've seen Kelce and Cooper Kupp. I've seen some crazy builds.
Which is nice. You love that type of ceiling.
Yeah.
You love that shit. And then you can build a squad around that and get some guys that are going to perform that maybe don't have as high a ceiling in the later rounds, but they have a high floor. So I always loved it. I like pairing that. As long as you're getting Cooper Kupp at a good value. I guess what's too high to take Cooper Kupp now that he has that risk?
It's tough because what we've always talked about is what if they start poorly? Matthew Stafford, they shut down players. I don't know. That team sucks. Why would you want to kind of risk your best asset? Maybe they trade him, but
that's why.
I think
if they do, then that's
I have a draft tonight and I have the 8th pick. If Cooper Kupp were to potentially fall to the second round in that 8th pick, right? So it's
it'd be 2-4,
2-4, yeah, 2-4. I might have to take him.
Yeah, I would totally take him.
Because at that point, you're gonna have guys. Here's what I'd say. If it's A.J. Brown or Cooper Kupp, I'm going to take Cooper Kupp. Because I think Devontae Smith is a guy you can probably get very similar value to A.J. Brown from production, but later on. Now, if it's a Garrett Wilson or Amon-Ra, I'm probably going to take Amon-Ra or Garrett Wilson. I feel more confident in them.
Yeah.
But if it's Devontae Adams, I'm going to take Cooper Kupp. Put it like that.
Yeah.
So because I think it's a very similar situation outside of health. So I'm reaching for upside. I think we've also seen with it's your second round pick, at least you still have a first. So, for example, tonight I'm looking to go wide receiver. That's my start unless everyone is gone.
And then what running backs are you targeting later? If you do,
I'm going to target a running back, one running back in the 3rd or the 4th round. Now, depending on who's available. So, for example, if I start wide receiver, right? If I go Stephon Diggs right now, and then it's an Amon-Ra, Garrett Wilson, A.J. Brown, Cooper Kupp, right? Sure. If those guys fall. If I get Cooper Kupp, I'm going to probably target another wide receiver in that 3rd round. A Keenan Allen and Amari Cooper, any of those guys. I'm going to make sure that I have enough high-end wide receivers. Then I'm going to go on that back end in that 4th round. I'm going to find an Aaron Jones if he's there. I've seen Jahmyr Gibbs fall late 3rd
Gibbs
potentially.
Is gonna go crazy, I think.
But the thing with Gibbs is you can get touchdown value with David Montgomery, so I'm not opposed to that. But I think if you can get Cooper Kupp in that 2nd round, potentially running backs that you'll end up targeting. I'm not high on Kenneth Walker, but we know that he's a hell of a running back, a guy that is in a great offense. Now we worried about Zach Charbonnet, but I think Kenneth Walker's still going to find goal line value. I've also done some drafts where like Travis Etienne fell to like the 4th, or like Ramondre or Breece Hall falls to the 4th. Yeah. I'm not opposed to that either.
I mean, so you're just like way more comfortable taking receivers early.
Yeah.
Getting those guys that you know are going to perform.
Totally.
And then taking a couple guys, running backs later that have a good chance to perform.
Weirdly, also, like, people are very anti-Jonathan Taylor, right? Which rightfully so, and I get it. But Jonathan Taylor, I got in one of my leagues in the 9th round.
Yeah, 9 is so late.
So,
like, what are some guys that are in that range?
In the 9th, bro? Like, I can't
even look on this draft. Like, let's see who's going. Let me see where JT went in my draft, actually, because I feel like that'll be a good testament.
Like, put it like this. I think guys that are going in that range were, like, Devin Singletary, Tank Bigsby, Tyler Algier. Like, I'm taking Jonathan Taylor. Because the way I look at drafts, and I think this is a good way, if you're listening to this right now and you still have a draft, or just in general, is if you reach for someone, there's probably not enough of a ceiling for them to kind of surpass that ADP of where you drafted them. Well, I guess it's not even really average draft position. It's where you drafted them. So theoretically, if I were to reach for Chris, like I've seen someone reach for Chris Olave early in the 2nd round, which I think Chris Olave is going to be a wide receiver 1 this year. I think that he's a guy I'm planting my flag on. But if I reach for him, then therefore I've already put his ceiling where he needs to be. He has to match that and surpass that. If I get him at his ADP, which is maybe like early 3rd, maybe late 2nd, now there's room. There's a bigger spectrum of where he can kind of go. But if you reach, you don't have that much room. If you get someone super low, like a Jonathan Taylor, the upside in the ceiling is massive. So the fact that I got Jonathan Taylor in the 9th, if he performs at the 7th round type of capital, then it's a home run hit, right? So I'm going to start.
I'm looking at this draft here. He went 5th round, so.
It's a little early. 6th round is where I would want to take Jonathan Taylor. And I got him in the 6th. I have, in 2 of my leagues right now, I have Jonathan Taylor. So, but I'm curious, what are some other guys that you're kind of looking at in fantasy where you're like, you know what, I feel very confident that this person's going to have a hell of a year? I know JK's always been someone, but who's someone else? Like, give me a wide receiver that you're super fucking high on that you think is going to, like, have a hell of a year.
That could finish wide receiver 1 type?
Wide receiver 1 or, like, a high-end wide receiver 2, yeah.
I'll give you a guy that could finish, like, literally, like, top 3.
Calvin Ridley?
CeeDee Lamb.
CeeDee Lamb, yeah.
I just think because of Brandon Cooks, like last year, CeeDee Lamb was the only guy on that offense that you could really look at and throw to. Yeah. Especially in the beginning of the year. There were guys that never played another snap that played like week 1, week 2, week 3. You never heard of them. And so this year you have Brandon Cooks who's going to take away a lot of attention, obviously, from him. And Dak another year, like, I think that connection is really going to be flourishing. That offense is explosive.
Quickly, are you worried about Mike McCarthy wanting to run the ball more?
No, because if anything, that opens up the pass even more. Look at the receivers that McCarthy has had, too. Like, he's played with guys. He's had Jordy Nelson in the past who's been a receiver 1. You know, Devontae Adams, guys like that. So not really worried about that. Yep. So I love him. Let's see, who else? Kind of looking through this list. I'm actually very high on Jerry Jeudy, which I've talked about in the past. And oddly enough,
the talent's there.
Auto-drafted him.
Yeah.
But
he's another guy that fell in one of my drafts, and I got him. Talent's always been there, though.
When you look at but even the performance, not only the talent, like when you look at the performance last year from like the second half of the year, he performed.
He was a wide receiver 1. Yeah, he was a wide receiver 1.
And so people, like, sometimes you got to go for these guys that aren't necessarily in big markets that, you know, people just think, like, they overlook them. Yet when you look at the stats, you're like, oh, this guy has been performing. And Jerry Jeudy's one of those guys where I think, like, a lot of people didn't pay attention to the end of last year, especially because the team wasn't in contention. And so now you could get him. You can probably get him at a pretty good value. And I kind of like Jerry Jeudy.
Well, I think another thing with fantasy is people don't want to draft someone they've been burned on before. Right? So, like, Antonio Gibson's a really good example. Antonio Gibson's a guy that has burned a lot of people over the last 2 years. But now you get Eric Bieniemy. J.D. McKissick is no longer there, so he fills that third down role perfectly. And I think Antonio Gibson's a guy that I think is going to have a good year. We've seen what Jerick McKinnon did with Eric Bieniemy in Kansas City. I think Antonio Gibson fills a very similar role. Brian Robinson isn't a great route runner. He's a big body. He's an older guy, but Antonio Gibson is a hell of a talent. One of the guys I think I'm going to plant my flag on this year is Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley, the last time he played football, was the wide receiver 4 in fantasy, I believe. And now you put him on a team that's one of the top passing offenses in the NFL. Trevor Lawrence is going to have a massive leap this year with Doug Peterson. I am all in on Calvin Ridley. When I look at tier number 3, he's on the bottom end of tier number 3. He's a guy that's going in the 3rd round.
Yeah.
Out of Calvin Ridley, Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper, Deebo Samuel, DJ Moore, Christian Watson, and DK Metcalf, which is kind of in that range where he's going, even T. Higgins, Calvin Ridley's the number 1 guy I think could finish as a top 10 wide receiver.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we've seen him do it before. That's the thing. The only thing that worries me about that Jags offense is, literally mouths.
to feed, yeah.
A lot of mouths. And Evan Ingram just signed a big contract. He's getting the ball. Like, you know, you mentioned the running backs there, the multiple receivers. So it's just like, it's not like they have a bunch of like decent guys. They have a bunch of really fucking good guys. And Trevor Lawrence can spread the ball around and really do his thing. So that's the only thing there. Calvin Ridley's talent he's by far the most talented player on that team outside of Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, can he kind of do it even with all those guys?
Let's rapid fire a couple players. Like one sentence, one hitters on some guys that you're looking at. Anyone you're specifically looking at right now?
Just put up those rankings, the same ones you're looking at.
Like
now.
I'm looking at ones right now. Keenan Allen, I think is gonna have a hell of a year. I think you know, he's a guy that's gonna kind of play that CeeDee Lamb role in the slot with Kellen Moore now. Amari Cooper, I'm really high on this year. I think Amari Cooper's a guy with Deshaun Watson. Like if Deshaun Watson had a better year, he'd probably be going a little bit higher. I think we know he's a hell of a talent.
Well, I think Lamar Jackson, he's being taken as kind of like the QB4, QB5.
Oh, absolutely.
I think he could finish QB1.
He could be his QB1, yeah.
Yeah, he could have another year like he did in 2019, MVP year. And especially with that new offense, man, I've been seeing a lot about how they've been running things with like just like the zone offense and everything they're doing there, where the way he goes through his reads, which he's never done before, which there's always going to be someone open because it's more of like the way they break it down offensively or looking at the defense, it's like levels. Yeah. So they're either looking at the middle of the field, like deep. Whereas like in the past, it was always like, all right, he goes through, he sees one guy, he's not there, and he takes off and run. And now it's like he's got so many more options to develop as a passer and then still run. I think Lamar could have a huge year this year. So I really like him.
I'm looking at more wide receivers. Nico Collins is a guy I reached for a little bit. I think wide receiver 1 in Houston. Think of like Brandon Cooks last year. Like, obviously, he's gone, and there's a lot more targets to go around. But there's not really anyone else. I mean, John Mechie could be the guy, but Tank Dell could be the guy. But I'm really high on Nico Collins. I think he's going to have a hell of a year. Zay Flowers in that same tier, a guy that can be wide receiver 1 on that Baltimore team, similar to what you were mentioning with Lamar Jackson. Some late-round flyers. Like, I've seen Adam Thielen go super fucking late, and I think, like, Thielen is a guy that didn't have a great year last year with a better offense, but a guy that can be the wide receiver 1 on a bad team. And I think that's your sweet spot in fantasy, where people forget that on bad teams, they still are going to be down and have to throw a lot. And Adam Thielen can get a lot more production. 2 years ago, he led the NFL in like touchdowns, I think it was, or something crazy.
He's just boring. I get it. He's boring, and he's in a boring offense.
You don't want to draft like a white wide receiver.
Yeah, that's part of it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that's like, if you can get a guy like Cooper Kupp right now, you're going to draft him. Obviously, forget the injury. Or like Julian Edelman in the past. Like you draft those guys that you know are going to get you receptions and all that kind of shit.
Some other guys I'm looking at. Alvin Kamara, obviously, I think a lot of people, I think it's like in PPR or half PPR, he's never finished below an RB2.
That's insane. And he's missing 4 games?
And he's missing 3 games.
3?
Yeah, that offense is going to be better. I love Alvin Kamara's value right now. I think he can be easily, at like minimum, a low-end RB2, and he could surpass that ADP easily. Some other guys, Jaylen Warren, like he's looked more explosive than Najee Harris. I think he's going to play a very similar role to like Tony Pollard did with Zeke when they had to feed Zeke, right, because of the contract and because of the value. But he's going to outperform him. So I think Jaylen Warren's a guy that could take over later on in the season and have standalone value. Still high. Obviously, I'm a Dolphins guy, but Devon Achane, Jeff Wilson's on IR. Raheem Mostert's never been able to stay healthy. Now, he was healthy last year, but this is a guy that they drafted in the 3rd round, even though they were looking at Jonathan Taylor. So he's someone that I absolutely love. The biggest sleeper late in drafts that for me I've like been really, really high on that I don't think anyone knows is Ty Chandler. And he's the RB2 in Minnesota. Now, Alexander Mattison, obviously behind Dalvin Cook, was great. But he's never been the full RB1 there. He's never had the full workload. Obviously, he did when Dalvin Cook went down. But he's never had the full spectrum of being a 3-down back, although he looks like Dalvin Cook. Now, Ty Chandler's a guy that, as the RB2, can come in easily, fill the passing down role. If Alexander Mattison goes down, he steps right into a massive role. They signed Myles Gaskin, and I've seen some people in fantasy that like are freaking out, like as if Myles Gaskin's going to contribute as RB2. He was on the Dolphins for the last 4 or 5 years. Anything. He's not doing absolutely anything. He's not someone to worry about. So that's someone that, like, I look at the RB2. If Alexander Mattison goes down, that's a handcuff I want to be a part of. That's a hell of an offense. Ty Chandler's a guy that I don't think anyone is going to draft in your leagues. You could probably get him in the last pick or pick him up on waivers. So I'll stop there in terms of like really late guys that I'm looking at.
Well, I feel like with that, a lot of these guys, like, for example, the Vikings didn't bring anybody in really, right? I mean, you talk about Gaskin, but they didn't bring anybody substantial. And so you think, all right, like Madison's going to have a big year. You just don't know, though, because you've never seen it.
Correct.
And it's kind of my thing with Tony Pollard. A lot of people are having him finish as RB1, like, or they're drafting him, mid first round. I've even seen sometimes, or at least late first round. This my league he went late first round, but you're assuming that he's going to be able to do what he did last year on a higher level because he's going to get more touches. But it's like, can he even handle more touches?
Yeah.
Like, part of the reason he was so explosive is because he didn't have as many touches.
Yeah, short amount.
And so I've seen this in the past. We've seen this in other scenarios where running backs who didn't have as much touches the year before, but they had great efficiency on that, they get more numbers. The efficiency goes way down. And so, like, you're betting on them hitting that upside, and I don't know if they will. So a guy like that, you talk about in Minnesota, like, you're almost like you're protecting yourself there, especially if you do draft. So if you drafted Alexander Madison, where's he gone typically?
I've seen him, like I said, going in the second round. I think he's going around like that fourth round.
So do you want a handcuff?
Yeah, I would. I know there's a lot of people that don't want to have handcuffs of your same team, but, like, I'm fine with that. We're going to do this again Thursday, so we got a lot to fucking talk about. Before we hop off, because we're trying to rapid fire and make this quick, what's one fantasy hot take for this season that you feel the strongest about?
Sure, you're going to have to go first.
Well, it would be Calvin Ridley finishes as a wide receiver one.
Like the number one?
No.
Oh,
a wide receiver
top
one.
12, okay.
Yeah. I feel more confident saying he's a top 6 wide receiver.
Yeah.
I could see him that. You want something? I'll go something in the first round, and I mentioned it earlier. Travis Kelce is not worth a top 5 pick in fantasy. And the reason I say that, and I think is because I think he's going to be 34 years old. He had 1,500 yards receiving. He was top 5 in almost every statistical category for just receptions and just like as a receiver, and obviously he's a tight end. But the problem with that is you're drafting again at his ceiling. Now, we've kind of been in this position where you've drafted Kelce late first for a numerous amount of years. The problem is he's now going as high as possible. I don't think if you draft Travis Kelce with a top 5 pick, he's going to surpass that pick. Like, I don't think you're going to get better value. He's not going to be someone that you're like, wow, he should be a top 3 pick. I get the positional advantage of a tight end, and I'm not saying he shouldn't be a first-round pick. I'm not saying he's not going to finish as the overall tight end 1. I just think he's a guy that is not worth my first-round pick, and it's someone I'd rather wait on late, whether it be the Darren Wallers of the world, the Pat Fryermuths, even Dallas Goederts, guys that I can find value later on that may not be as set and forget it, but are still going to give me enough production week over week. So I don't think Travis Kelce is worth a top 5 pick in fantasy, and that's what I'm dying on.
I can see that. This could be the year. You never know when the year's going to be with Travis Kelce.
I think he's still tight end 1, but he's not worth the top 5 pick.
I got you. All right, so I got a couple. And one I kind of mentioned. I think Jared Jeudy could finish as a wide receiver 1. But I'm going to switch off of that because you went tight end. You mentioned Calvin Ridley being a receiver and everything like that. So I'm going to switch over to quarterback. And I'm riding on this guy as like the MVP for this year. And so I think, like, if you're going to go value for quarterback,
Lamar.
At some point, go Lamar. And I'm huge on Justin Fields and all that type of stuff. But you're still banking on potential with Fields. With Lamar, you've seen him do it. You've seen him finish as QB1. And you've seen him have just a crazy MVP year. And he has the rushing upside more than anybody else. The passing is going to be better this year. They have so much talent around him. I think he could finish as QB1. And I think he's worth taking as a QB1. So
where do you take him? You reaching for him in the third?
Yeah, so you probably – because here's the thing, right? He's going as like QB4, QB5, which is around, for the 5th round, usually 4th,
I've seen Lamar going I feel like Lamar's going in the 4th round.
So you got to know your league.
Yeah.
Right? You kind of know your league. You know who people love. A lot of times, like, fans of, like, if I'm a fan of the Bills, I'm going to go reach for Josh Allen, right? So know your league. But if you think that Lamar Jackson could be gone by round 4, I'm not mad. I'm not mad at it. Like, go take him at the end of the 3rd, beginning of the 4th, whatever. I think he could really have that type of season. And we've seen him all the time. I know, like, it's been popular in the past few years to let quarterbacks go and then take a guy who can finish as a bottom, like, top 10 guy, maybe like QB8, QB9 in the later rounds. Go take him. I've always been a fan of that too. But we've also seen teams, as we see fucking like lightning behind us, we've also seen teams or years where that QB1 has such an amazing year that they literally carry teams to championships.
Totally.
We've seen that with Peyton. We've seen that with Jalen Hurts last year. We've seen that like multiple years. And Lamar Jackson can have that type of year. It's worth going and getting if you're not even sure about that 3rd round guy that you're going to get, especially because I think with the 1st and 2nd round, you're pretty confident with who you're taking. But at some point in that, like, third, fourth, maybe even in that range, like, you don't really love what you got.
I agree.
So go get your quarterback. I think Lamar could be that guy.
I agree. Good take. All right, well, as a reminder, we're going to be doing this every Tuesday and Thursday during the NFL season. We're going to have another episode coming Thursday where we're going to talk to where, you know, what we think waiver wire additions are going to look like in week 1. I think there's a fire alarm going on behind us. So that's cool. But yeah, so we'll be back Thursday.
Fuck yeah.
And we'll be doing a lot more fantasy talk this year. So stick around, especially if you like fantasy stuff.
Good luck if you're drafting stuff.
Yeah, and hey, if you want to go to, you know, any underdog promos or any other DFS stuff, go to thegameday.com. You're going to find it all. So make sure to get that. But hey, we'll see you Thursday. I'll see you Thursday. I'll see you tomorrow and right now.
Every day. All right. Peace.